Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton King. Today we're rewinding on ELP. We had got to Trilogy, that's my favourite ELP album, and now we have reached the mighty Brain Salad Surgery. Do you know what the title is about?
No.
It's smutty. It's smutty, sadly. It was originally going to be called Whip Some Skull on You. It's basically a euphemism for something I'm not going to mention involving groupies. Obviously, they're easily their best cover. They went to see what's his name?
Geiger.
Yeah. They went to Geiger's house and saw loads of paintings around the place, and they saw two paintings actually. They saw this freaky skull thing, and they saw the woman that you get on the inside, and they ended up with a combination of those two. I mean, it's such a profound cover, and it echoes the music so well. And that was the inside. But actually, the inside originally had a giant penis there. The idea was that the woman was moving towards the penis, which they had to cut out because the record company objected. So it's nothing like as tasteful and artistic as it initially looks, sadly. But yeah, the music. This is their destination. This is ELP's destination. They have, this was their magnum opus. This is what they were made to do. It's their moment, in the sense that it is their Tales from Topographic Oceans. It is also their Lamb, or whatever. It's the destination. It's where they got to, and it is unique, even for ELP. Never to be repeated. So whereas Radiohead, they progressed onto this style that they got to with Kid A. Then they just carried on making albums that sound like Kid A. With ELP, they never did that again. They sort of went back to a different style. Really. It was never quite like that again. I suppose people would argue that the song Pirates is maybe, but I don't think so. I think it's much more sort of convoluted, less melodic. There's something really profound. It's the big epic. The big epic. It was so big it didn't fit on one side. It actually started on side one and finished on side two because it's 35 minutes long. But it's actually 3 movements, so it's not quite as bad as you think. But that's where the band really worked together. And we talked about, didn't we? That Greg Lake does his catchy folk songs, which are really good, and they're just separate from the Keith Emerson and the Carl Palmer thing. They're separate things, but here the band are actually as one, and this is the big epic track is where they fully achieve the commercialness with the progginess, with something really unique and really timeless, and that's really, really special. It's got 5 songs and 2 of them I don't like, which is a bit rubbish. But actually, obviously one of those songs is 35 minutes long. I've never been a fan of track 1 and track 4, which I'll talk about in a bit. But other than that, yes. I think it's certainly influential, but not really with rock music. If you listen to sort of TV music and things like that, you'll hear it in there. So yes, it is their moment. I do get the impression it took a lot of effort to make music of that style, which is probably why they didn't want to do it anymore. And after that tour, they kind of split up, and they came back and they did the Works thing and everything, but really, this was it. And yet, my favourite album is Trilogy. But this is definitely a more successful album than Tales, for example. This is a success, whereas Tales, in many ways, is not a success. So, what did you think of the album?
Yeah, I like what you're talking about, the unity of the band. I mean, we've mentioned it before, where balance is such an important thing. With ELP, the tendency is, when you've got sort of like uber musicians involved, is for each track to become a vehicle for one of the musicians to play their stuff. Or the band can be like the Jimi Hendrix experience, it's geared towards one band member. But what happens is when a band is well balanced, the individual parts join together and the whole becomes more than just some of those individual parts.
The individuals don't matter anymore. It's just the sound of the band matters.
And that's when some real special stuff happens. I mean, the Beatles were a pretty well balanced band.
Yes.
We've talked about Metallica before. Obviously you don't like Metallica, but you had to acknowledge that that as far as their individual sort of skills go, they're pretty equal, and that's where the strength comes in.
Everyone can agree in the 80s that was certainly the case.
Yeah. And what comes out of this is a pretty iconic piece of work with very dark tones and imagery, and something that will change, became massively influential, particularly with sort of like modern music, heavy metal and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where would it be without this album? So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Interesting listening to it with a view to review it, how differently you hear things. And I've really noticed there's a huge dip in the production standards from the previous album. The sound of Trilogy is wonderful sound. And Tarkus as well. You know, it's that rounded proggy sound, and all the neo prog bands, that's what they went for. And this, Greg Lake is recording in the other room, and it sounds like I'd go as far as to say Keith Emerson has just turned the treble up full and turned all the bass down. There's no bass on this album at all. It's just and it really makes the keyboards cut through. Maybe that's the idea. I don't know, but I don't think that's good production. I'd much prefer this album sounding like that one sounds. Of course, it was their own recording studio, and that's one of the reasons they managed to sort of take that leap into a new level of complexity. They could sit there and figure things out without, burning studio time money. But musically, the journey we went through was really where you've got a rock band playing rock music, and the keyboard player really likes traditional classical music, and he's bringing bits of those in, and it's like the nice. Whereas here, he's over that time, really over the period of these three albums, Keith Emerson's tastes changed, and he went from liking normal classical music and very, very straight classical music like Pictures and Exhibition to liking Ginestra and that kind of stuff. Is it Ginestra or Gynestra? What do you think?
Just stick with what you had, Ginestra.
Yeah, so the first song is called Jerusalem, and it is Jerusalem, that Jerusalem. It's not like Bruce Dickinson where he took the lyrics and made this cool song out of it. It's just Jerusalem. And really interestingly, for the first time, Keith Emerson and Carl Palmer decided, right, we're going to veto this idea of always releasing Greg Lake's song as the single. So Greg Lake's folky song wasn't the single, Jerusalem was the single. And the BBC banned it. The BBC banned it because, well, it's offensive, because it's such an important English song. People will be offended. I do wonder if that's not the reason they banned it. I think they banned it because it sounds horrible, but I think I'm the only person that thinks it sounds horrible, so I can't quite get that. I just don't think it works at all. I think some of the chord voicings are really jarring. It sounds like they didn't really spend too much time on it, and it's plodding, and it doesn't have a proper intro, it just cuts in. That's one of the things that makes the album scary, in a way. So in a way it adds to the sort of feel of the album, but it just cuts in with rather than a proper intro, which is really strange. But yeah, I don't like Jerusalem on this album. Is that weird?
Yeah, I did that. I mean, this is an awesome opening track. Very dramatic. It's the dark, deep stuff that sort of kicks in straight away. It's almost, well, there's a bit of controversy with the band and sort of like satanic type stuff. And you can tell from this first opening track. I mean, the first time I ever listened to it, I thought, wow, hang on, what am I listening to here? But yeah, it's very good. They're using notes that they shouldn't be using. The tritone is obviously, banned at this point until this track, where it changes the world and suddenly becomes really cool and things like that. Yeah, brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next song? Toccata is the next song. This is the Ginestra cover version. The guy was still alive, so because it's modern classical, you can't just play this stuff like Pictures or something. So he had to get permission, and he was denied permission by his company, or Ginestra's, whoever they were. So he rang him up and said, why you let me in? So in the end, he had to go and see the guy. He had to go and see Ginestra to play him his record, to make him agree to let them do it. And so I think it was Keith Emerson and the manager, I think, went to this guy's house, and they put the record on. They had tea first and put the record on, and Keith Emerson just sort of pretends to stare pensively out the window. Well, and all he hears the guy saying is absolutely awful. At the end, he says, "Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, release it." So nobody knows what that means, but yeah, this is brutal stuff. This is as extreme as ELP ever got. So if Brain Cellar Surgery is the first ELP album you've bought, which most people probably do, we've had Jerusalem and then Toccata, which is a bit much, really. A lot of it is the percussive stuff. It's Carl Palmer's experimenting with the electronic percussion stuff, and he's got an arpeggiator on his drums so he can go. It's interesting. They never played this again. I don't think so. After this tour, they played it the whole tour. They played the whole album, but this track they never played again, even though it's a really famous track. And I wonder if it's just because it's hard. that I think it was on the set list for the reunion at High Voltage, and they didn't play it.
Strange.
So they might have decided to abandon it.
I mean, I find this track, it's very obviously very memorable, but actually not brilliant. I find this album's, the openings, the intros to the song don't necessarily bear much relation to the song itself, but they're always quite memorable. I think this is one of those songs where it's a good song, inspired by, the lyrics are actually inspired by Tolkien and Gandalf, things like that, which feels a little bit out of place on this album. But yeah, it's not one of my favourites.
That is interesting, but I can't answer that. I'll have to answer that another time. Track 3, Still, You Turn Me On. And this is Greg Lake's ballad, obligatory ballad that they decided they weren't going to release as a single, and I think this time they really should have done. It's a good song. It's not as good as From the Beginning, which I think is Greg Lake's moment. Again, I don't know the production. Greg Lake's recording in the other room. I've never understood that kind of sound. I want to hear the band playing clearly, not this sort of wishy-washy production. I've done the production effects. But obviously, the first time I heard this album, I was only about 13, and that was the first song I liked, because the rest of it scared me.
Yeah, I just think this is an awesome track, inspired H.P. Lovecraft's story of the same name. Just brilliant.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Track 4 is Benny the Bouncer. This is the end of the trilogy. I think they call it the Western Trilogy, Greg Lake's Western Trilogy. Started with Jeremy Bender, then we had the Sheriff, and now we've got Benny the Bouncer. I really dislike this. I think it's horrible. It's of the three, it's the worst one. The first one is good. Jeremy Bender, I'm okay with Jeremy Bender. It's a bit silly. It's okay. It's a bit of fun. It's very short. The Sheriff, he's actually really good and entertaining. He's putting on this London accent on this, with really horrible keyboard patches Keith Emerson's using, and I find it completely unlistenable.
This is a pretty famous track. I think some of the few post-production stuff they actually did went on into this track, guitar solo, and they double track the guitar solo, which makes it stand out a little bit on the album. It's quite clever lyrics, very in keeping with the theme of the album, and this is one of their biggies. Okay,
and we're on to track 5 now. Technically, track 5 is the rest of the album, and on my previous CD, before I bought the remaster, that was Karn Evil 9, the 35-minute epic. But here, nicely, thankfully and mercifully, they actually split up the movements into 4, actually, because of course the first movement was split over 2 sides on the original vinyl. I think that's necessary, and I think it's important, because obviously, particularly, the second side would have introduced the Welcome Back My Friends bit, so that's interesting. But yeah, so Karn Evil 9 first impression is the definitive moment, really, not the rest of it, I think, where you've brought the progginess of Tarkus in with something very accessible, and a lot of those melodies, they're very sort of pentatonic and very riffy and very rock and roll. Dun 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 dun. That's just classic rock and roll, really. And with the classic vocals, the famous lyrics. It's ELP's most famous moment is that bit of vocals, not Lucky Man, I'm sure. And if you played people Welcome Back My Friends to the Show Not Ever End, they would recognise it, and they might not recognise Lucky Man. But they wouldn't know it was ELP. Whereas if they knew Lucky Man, they would know ELP. I think so. It is a definitive moment in it, and it actually works perfectly well as a piece of music on its own. Great. At the end, and they're all just on fire on it. It's fantastic.
I mean, the thing that stands out to me for this part is the bass. The bass is crystal clear, which is kind of cool for a song which is actually pretty pedestrian. I find it's pretty normal by their standards. The bass is kind of unique in the sense that it's not really a timekeeping thing. Actually, it's more melodic and seems to follow the guitar a little bit more. But this is you get glimpses of just the bass here, and it's really cool. But that's probably the highlight of.
Next song is track 6, which is the Karn Evil 9 second movement, or impression. They call it first impression and second impression. But the second movement, which is possibly the ultimate Emerson Palmer thing, and they've been left to go, right, this is the Emerson Palmer bit. Obviously Greg Lake's playing the bass as well. And it's just a great bit of proggy, jazzy, noodling-y stuff. Although it isn't noodling, it's all written. And it's one of those things where they didn't have any sheet music. They didn't sight read this stuff. They just remembered it, which is pretty amazing, really. I mean, even say Dream Theater, was made by John Petrucci, whereas John Rudess on the keyboards, he's got a sheet music screen playing the sheet music, quite understandably, John Petrucci just remembers it, which is amazing, but not anything like as amazing as remembering this stuff. And again, that's probably one of the reasons why they don't play much of this stuff in later years. Yeah, it's fantastic. And it was interesting. There's a fantastic bit of footage of them actually writing this stuff and actually working it out. You know, I mean, you don't normally get that with this kind of band, and that is fantastic. It was interesting reading the comments on YouTube about how people are surprised that they're having to work it out, as if what normally happens. They just lie around with groupies, and then Keith Emerson just goes and they're magically synchronised because they're gods. No, they had to practice and learn it over and over and over and over and over again. Brilliant stuff. Again, it's one of their definitive moments.
Again, this is the highlight of the song is the intro. Is it a jaw harp at the beginning? Boing, boing, boing. It's like a semi-acoustic. It's like an acoustic type thing.
Yeah.
There's like a jaw harp at the beginning. It's a really cool. And I wish they'd stuck with it and committed to that and gone all the way through that. Once the intro's over, it becomes pretty banal. These are all good songs, yeah. I mean, this is a great album. Changes the landscape of music for years to come and all that. But as it goes on, this is not a highlight for me apart from the intro, which I wish they'd stuck with.
So, track 7, I'm calling it track 7, it's really still part of track 5, is the third impression, so the final movement of Karn Evil 9. This is the bit I've never been entirely convinced by, and I don't know if it's because of the lyrics. I've always thought that kind of thing's really silly. No computer stands in my way. Negative, primitive, and the robot talks. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? Isn't it ridiculous? I don't know, but yeah, it's a great melody. Do 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 do, and you know, do 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 do. But it is much lighter than what's gone on before. Whereas the first two movements are legendary, ultimate prog. This is just good, but a lot lighter. And maybe intentionally, you know. And it's big and epic, and you know, it's not bad by any means. But certainly of those three movements, it's the one I go to least.
Yeah, the epicness of this track, I mean, it is of epic length, I suppose. For me, this is the one that gets better with age, because it's not like a big track, but whenever you listen to it, it's always good. So, you know, you look for the headlining tracks out of the CD, you listen to that, and then you leave this to run through, and actually, this is really good. There's a sort of bluesy edge to the lyrics on this one, which obviously, they claim to be all listening to blues music at the time, but they don't. It's obviously developed from blues music, but it's a real shift along. It's not what you wouldn't automatically go, this is straight blues inspired rock. This album, but this one it's a little bit more so, more subject matter than anything else, which I think they would have enjoyed. They would have enjoyed doing.
Have you heard the original by Ainsley Dunbar?
No.
Good actually. It's pretty good. It's not as good as that one, but it's still pretty good. So anyway, that's Brainside Surgery. That's closing the door on the LP. I know somebody did request Works 1 and 2 as well. I'll tell you what, at some point I will do a mini review of those albums as well, because the guy pointed out that nobody's done it on YouTube, so I'll be the only one. I'll be the only person that's done Them and Us and Thingfish as well, but that's the way it goes.
Are we going to give it eggs?
Egging is very difficult because I think it's 5 eggs. I can't give it 6 eggs for me because it isn't perfect. It has to be perfect for individually to be 6 eggs. So yeah, it's a 5 egg album. It's a good 5 because it's a definitive moment in rock. So yes, join us next week for Gentle Giant. Hey, about time. See you next week.
Bye bye.